All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. We are into February, Mr. Wolf.
Yes, sir. How you guys doing?
Man, I tell you,
Uh,
January couldn't end quick enough. It was a long month.
Well, they made February one day longer, just so you're further from January as you can be at this point. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We had a wild weekend the last weekend between rain and snow and weather there in the whole Denver Front Range.
yeah. And today it's like pretty nice and sunny, so
Yeah.
kind of standard issue, Colorado, early winter, seeing all the seasons here in one day. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know we had a lot of our guys were out and about in the, fighting the storm here, fighting the elements, and some of us had success. Now we had a couple of our newer agents get something under contract, so congratulations to them. Very awesome to start the year off right. And yeah, it's keeping the ball rolling. So congrats on our guys getting out there and driving safely, but not letting the elements get in their way of performing for their clients. I really appreciate that from our team.
Yeah, I do too. And it's so exciting to hear all the things in the pipeline. And like you said, we had some good successes over the weekend, which is super, super fantastic. So yeah, I think it's awesome. So I guess Friday, 2/9. So we're coming up on Super Bowl weekend.
Hmm.
Uh, kind of as you can tell, go Chiefs.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I think we left off 2 weeks ago talking about a number of changes in Colorado around rentals, what you can do, can't do, et cetera, et cetera. And I know we spent a lot of time on Denver County, which seems to be the biggest change. But you last week had shared you think it's going to be that way statewide at some point anyway. But there's
Correct.
a number of topics. So do you want to maybe kind of pick up where we left off, and we can take the conversation wherever it goes?
Exactly. Yeah. So we did speak a little bit about Denver, the city of Denver, specifically around like having to get licensure as a renter, or as a landlord, apologize, even if you only own one rental. And again, that is at this point just Denver, but the taste of the town seems to be that that's going to spread statewide, and there were quite a few statewide changes through both House and Senate bills that were passed that did expand renter rights as well as kind of increase responsibilities and narrow some of the flexibility that landlords may have experienced in the past years, right? So again, I'm not here to debate the justification of those or the value of them. But this kind of is what it is, and if you want to see changes expanded, either in further expanding borrower rights, renter rights, or see some of that control come back across the landlord, that's why we have voting coming up here in November, and that's why you can contact your senators and do your thing. But like we said before, if like most laws, if everyone was just super cool and doing the right thing all the time, we probably wouldn't need them. So, so just keep that in mind. But obviously, encourage you to kind of make your voices heard in whatever way you feel necessary. And we're gonna keep rolling here with just a couple more items. So we should spend a lot less time on this time around, a little less dense, guys. I know that was not everyone finds rental and real estate law as interesting as I do. So, but there were some changes made specifically around a couple of items that we're going to cover today around pets and pet expenses that landlords are allowed to realize, as well as some environmental hazards they're required to report on. So these are both going to be state bills, statewide laws. So this is going to impact anyone who's a property owner or renter in the state of Colorado. Um, so previously, it's not uncommon for the last 15-ish years or so for landlords to charge like pet rent, quote unquote, right? So I mean, this is obviously I don't have numbers in this, but just based upon my experience working with renters and with landlords, at least 50% of the people that I connect with have pets, right? So that is definitely a strong indication, and I'm sure that was a good revenue source for a lot of landlords in the past, especially kind of your bigger industrial landlords out there. So there wasn't really a guideline or a limit to my knowledge on what people could charge for pet rent. It was just kind of what the public is willing to digest as far as what they would be willing to pay for their pets. And now pet rent is currently capped as of this year at $35 or 1.5% of the monthly rent, whichever is higher. Okay. So most renters are based on kind of average rents are going to end up paying that $35 in pet rent. And that is going to be per apartment. So if you have two pets, you're still only going to be paying your $35, not 70. Um, Additionally, now pet security deposits are now capped at $300 and must be refundable. So pet fees, like we might have seen in the past, are no longer going to be allowed, right? So it used to be that a pretty common thing for renters to deal with would be, oh, hey, I want to bring my dog or my cat or what have you in. You would be charged a couple $100 pet deposit, a couple $100 pet fee, that so only the deposit being refundable. And you'd pay 25, 35, $45 a month in pet rent, right? So this has put more brackets around that process and said like, hey, you can only ever charge 35, which to me probably means that every single person's going to charge 35. So, the $25 ones are probably going to go away, and the deposit's not capped at $300. Now, to be clear, that's just a deposit you can retain and hold in escrow, realtors that they're listening. But that doesn't mean that like if Fido causes $3,000 in damage, you cannot pursue the dog owner for making yourself whole. It's just the amount you can hold in deposit, right? And pet fees are no longer allowed. So that, some complexes I know wouldn't charge any deposit. They would just charge like a $300 fee and that's it. And they would keep it. So that is going away now. Now, obviously, there's still, this is getting a little out of what we're talking about today, but the jury literally, or the judges, I guess, suppose, are still out on how emotional support animals are going to be impacted, how this is going to affect them. I believe it's kind of working itself through the court system right now, but as it stands, to my knowledge, if someone were to go out there and receive essentially a prescription for their pet in the form of an emotional support animal certification, then they are no longer an animal; they become medicine, and landlords cannot charge fees or rent or deposits or any of that stuff for that. They, of course, would still be responsible for their damage. If I spill Pepto-Bismol and stain my carpet, I don't get to say that you can't charge me for that because it's medicine. So if your emotional support animal still causes damage, you would still be responsible for the landlord to make them whole on that. But yeah, so that makes sense what I'm saying there. So not as much wide sweeping changes, more just kind of bracketing everything and making the process very similar for everybody. It does not anywhere in there at this point say you have to accept pets. So honestly, this doesn't impact things all that much. I think it kind of makes the expectations a little more standard,
Yeah.
So, now will or not accept pets is impacted by that emotional support animal conversation that's still being had right now.
Right.
But at this point, if you are just a simple pet owner or your tenant is a simple pet owner, this just puts brackets on what you can charge per month and what your deposit looks like and doesn't require you to accept pets at this point.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think it's gonna, like you said, put some brackets around it. There's definitely gonna be a shift and a change here. And I would hope that some don't abuse the emotional support animal environment, as well. But at the same time, I think it kind of makes it a playing field there. And it is nice to see that it's per unit, it's not per pet. So I think
Mhm.
that can get expensive quickly, especially if you have, two dogs or two cats or whatever.
Yeah, and it does add up quite a bit, right? I mean, obviously, if I were going to play devil's advocate from the land perspective, it's like, well, you now are twice as likely to damage my property, right? Assuming your dogs are equally behaved,
Right.
But again, it doesn't prevent them from retaining that $300 security deposit or pursuing the pet owner for any other damages that may or may not be caused, right? So
Right.
it limits a profit center basically,
Right.
which I can understand, to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
Now, yeah, so that's kind of it on that one, right? Nothing too crazy. I don't think, landlords experience too much of a loss or tenants experience too much of a right advancement here. It was more just like, rather than it being kind of a little bit nebulous what is going to be paid, it makes it easier for tenants and landlords, in my opinion, to budget, and understand what fees they can charge and cannot charge, right? So,
Right.
um,
Right.
yeah, and then the last thing I want to talk about was there were some environmental hazard adjustments.
Okay.
So especially out here in Colorado, and kind of in most of the mountain region here, so you'll see similar, not from a rental perspective, but the existence of a gas called radon, similar kind of in
Yes.
area, right, in mountainous regions, right? So, um, again, I'm not a radon mitigation expert. Radon Awareness Month was the last month of January, though, so we should probably put this one first. But the radon is a gas that is believed to be damaging to the health, right? So the health organizations around the country want this to be limited at 4.0 PCL, which I believe is like parts per billion or trillion or some very big number. So, and you'll most commonly see this come up in conversations when a basement of a dwelling is occupiable space, right? So if there's bedrooms down there, living rooms, even, if it's basically a finished basement is where this is likely to come up, right? Not to say that radon gas doesn't exist in your unfinished basement. It likely does if it was going to exist in a finished basement. It's more just that the odds of like someone sleeping down there and being impacted by the gas is limited, right? So my understanding is these kinds of recommendations are really built to protect young, old, and people who are more susceptible to illness and things like that, right? So just keeping that in mind with those limits. So now the state of Colorado, on the rental side of the house, is going to be treating radon similar to how they have treated lead-based paint in the past, right? Now, the difference obviously being that, we don't deem it necessary to notify anyone about lead-based paint if a home was built after January 1st of 78, because we don't use lead-based paint after that time frame, right? Versus, we can't just, to my knowledge, we don't have technology to 100% shut out the existence of radon gas, regardless of how a house was built 50 years ago or yesterday. So now you are required to disclose to your tenants basically that radon exists, right? So you have to disclose the through giving a pamphlet and a radon disclosure form to your tenants and any information that you have as a landlord about the presence of radon gas, right? So let's say you bought this house a few years ago, and when you bought it through your own due diligence, which I think is advisable, we're about to talk about here, you tested for radon if it was a finished basement, and you found out the radon levels were ABC, right? So, maybe there's a radon mitigation system installed. They're honestly fairly reasonable. They're usually in the $900, $1,200 range in my experience. I've had a great experience working with all Colorado radon myself in the past. So definitely, if you have questions, I think they'd be a great resource, as well as any other certified radon specialist might be. But yeah, so you basically have to disclose all that information to your potential tenants upon lease execution. Again, and it's not a required disclosure. And you're on the buy and sell side, at the buyer's due diligence item. But if you are aware of it, I think my advice to any clients I have would be to err on the side of safety and put it on your seller's property disclosure form, and say like, hey man, we tested when we bought the house, tested under, recommended levels of mitigation, or there's already a mitigation system installed. Here's the information on that, right? So
Right.
the last, I know, but not as much dense stuff this time around as there was a couple weeks ago. But
Okay.
mostly it's just kind of informative, and again, it's, I don't have a major issue with it. I think that, renters are probably the people who live in Colorado that are least likely to be aware of radon gas issues. If you've lived here or have been around to the point to where you're buying a home, obviously people buy a home right when they move to Colorado all the time. But if we're playing the numbers, if you're buying a house, you probably have lived here for somewhere between 1,000 years. So you should be aware of gas. Versus if you're a brand new person moving to Colorado and you're renting, you may not have knowledge, right? And you may put, your child's bedroom downstairs, or may have your elderly grandparents sleep downstairs on a visit. And if you're not aware of the dangers that radon gas can impose, something bad could happen. So I don't think that information is going to hurt anybody. Obviously, I doubt that, again, that this information is going to limit anyone's renter pool, or anything like that. And again, if you are a landlord, I would want to know the conditions of my home, right? So if I owned a home with a finished basement, I would want to know if radon is present and what I can do to mitigate that, just to make sure that I'm as protected as possible as well. So I don't have a major issue with this at all. I don't know what your thoughts are, Michael, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, we had always gone a couple of directions. One is that if it's an unfinished basement and, it's like, well, let's just say that it did test higher than the recommended level. Well, sometimes it makes sense to get a seller credit sometimes, because if they're going to finish the basement, it's like a 99% chance, no matter where the installer installs, it's going to be wrong. Right? So that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Another way to do it is if it's a finished basement, but there's no sleeping rooms. That's another issue. But when there's sleeping rooms and you're down there, and it's one of those deals we explain to our sellers and our buyers. This house could test positive for radon at a higher level, and the neighbor next door was low.
Yeah.
There's not a way to around that. There's no magic thing you can do to make it not do that. But I think a lot of the really reputable home inspectors are also talking to clients about that as well, and
Right.
what that looks like. The thing about it is that we got to be smart as buyer's agents. If we know someone wants that, we need to get that inspection in early enough to where they
Mhm.
can come back and either get that result, or they can place it a couple days before the inspection, so we can get all of the inspection stuff handled at one time versus going back and forth on those things.
Yeah, and you basically need a couple extra days like you're talking about. An extra 48 hours or so should be plenty to get the information that you need. And again, and we're talking about this because we're so comfortable and used to having this conversation as realtors that work with buyers and with sellers. And I don't think that it's any surprise or anything unwarranted that renters should have access to this information. Right now, they don't have the same authority to request that I guess I can say Robert's request, but they don't have the same authority to basically demand that a radon mitigation system be installed, right? They have to be informed, and sellers again aren't required to do any testing. But I think professional advice. I think it's a good idea to know the condition of your home, because God forbid, obviously, but like if a something were to happen to somebody and someone were to get ill or pass away, and they test your basement, your radon levels were 10 parts per billion, then I think you're probably putting yourself in a tight situation, right? Versus if you bite the bullet, get it tested, mitigate if necessary, and go from there. And again, to your point, like there's no good way to tell. Like again, like looks like you said, like my house could test high for levels, your house could be next door and not test high. We could both have different, be in a very similar location. But I would say, in my experience, radon levels are common enough out here to where I'm never surprised. You know, I've never like bought a house in ABC area in Colorado. I'm like, oh man, radon totally fine. Never, I'd be shocked if the levels were above 4.0. It's common enough to where I'm never shocked by it, right? Or never even really surprised by it necessarily. It's kind of a cost of doing business almost here in the state. To the point where most new builders are installing either private or like community radon mitigation
Huh?
systems as they develop units. I guess I shouldn't say most because I don't know that, but quite a few. So you'll see these like communal systems that have like a passive system installed in every home they build that dumps out, somewhere in the community, so that their current buyers and future buyers don't have to worry about it nearly as much, right? So,
Right.
um, and again, I think it's still, even if a system's there, it's not a terrible idea to test as a buyer because you don't know how well those systems are working, and usually they're very, very well warranted. So if a system isn't performing, typically it's not that crazy of a thing to call up the installer and it's like, hey man, system's not working well, I need you to come out and service this thing or fix it, right? And those things are, in my experience, very, very well warranted.
Right.
Are not a big deal to get adjusted. So again, I don't have a problem with this. Again, it's basically just information. And if your house is still what that renter wants to move into and you still want to rent to them, nothing else changes here, right?
Right.
And I do think that renters, again, because I'm looking out for the folks who are moving from out of state who don't have as much experience living in Colorado as you or I do here. I think they should have access to the same information, and it shouldn't just be like a insider, oh, I've lived in Colorado for 10 years and I'm aware of radon thing, So
Right.
um that's kind of the major changes between this video and last video from like a rental law and landlord and tenant responsibilities perspective. Obviously the last one was much more dense, this one is just kind of more informative.
Right.
I encourage you to realtors out there, talk to your managing brokers, talk to if you definitely take your annual commission update class if you haven't already, guys. That's a great
Yeah.
source for this information. I'm always, and again, it happens every year and people get busy, and I'm not here to shame anyone that much, but a little shade. If you're taking your ACU class or or Colorado contract class in like November, I don't know what you're doing, man. Like it's, like take the information now when it's still valuable and it can still improve your client's experience because man, if this is news to you and you're helping a client rent a place and you're not aware that they're owed this information, I mean, whose fault is it? Is it the landlord's fault for not supplying it to you? Is it your fault for not asking? Is your not fault for not informing your client? Is your client's fault for not knowing what their rights were? Probably a
Right.
little everything, but I would want to make sure my clients know what their rights are on both the buyer and the seller side. And that class is really informative. I want to thank Damien for teaching it. It was super impactful, and I think our agents took a lot out of it. And I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to our contracts class tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
we do our best to make sure all of our agents are as informed as possible, as quickly as possible, and we are going to be, day 37 in, and we will have basically as equipped as our agents can be to effectively work for their clients. So,
Right.
I think, right, pretty quick.
I think so too. And I think, we've always believed to get them done in January if you can. That way you, like you said, you've got 12 months to leverage all those tools, right? And you made a really interesting point. It's about the experience. right? What is the experience that they're left with? So, and then you mentioned the contract, and thank you for going through these last 2 weeks. I think it's a lot of great insight, and I think as more and more of us, realtors, are engaging with clients who are renting, and it gives us a little bit of a leg up, I think. And so tomorrow, we're as a group or as a team, we're doing our 2024 contracts class, and this is one of those years where there's been a number of updates and a number of suggestions as we move forward. So I'm kind of excited about that. So we'll be doing that tomorrow, and maybe our next Fun Fact Friday video, we can talk a little bit about what's new in the contract.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun, right? And again, that's stuff that you and I nerd out on a little bit that not everyone appreciates, but it's our show, so
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about it. So I think that's very fun. I'm excited to dig through that a little bit more, and yeah, kind of go from there and talk about some of those changes. And honestly, guys, I haven't, I kind of, I went through the red line a little bit, so I'm not as fully informed as I will be after our class tomorrow.
Right.
There's been years where there's been big, wide sweeping changes, and there's been years where there's been like, we changed some words and we changed the
Right.
order of things. And,
Right.
but even something as small as we talked about, like, one of our favorite changes over the last, I would say 6, 7 years has been a super small change, but adding in the time of day deadline to the dates
Yeah.
and deadline section,
Yep.
it was it the how the contract functions, it changed zero, but it made it very obvious and very clear to everyone that my clients are not going to be bound to work they receive at 11:45 p.m.
Right.
Does not make any sense, right? So you get to
Right.
set up however you wish. There's variance in there. I use 7 p.m. I find that to be a reasonable time for my clients to do stuff after work, but before bedtime. And I think that's reasonable. So something like that, maybe there'll be a cool, fun thing like that changes that's outkicks its coverage as far as it's the sweepiness of its change. But and there's been times when they've added in whole suites of conversation, like splitting up of the inspection deadlines, splitting up of the loan deadlines. I think were very big changes and very good changes because now they're functioning as they were meant to be instead of kind of being played with a little bit to try to game the system, right? So we'll see what they say.
Yeah. No, that's good too. So we're going into Super Bowl weekend. Who are you favoring?
Okay, so I have some information for you here. So,
Okay.
and again, so this is today, Monday, February 5th, and this is I'm using primarily CBS Sports here. So if you get different odds, don't yell at me. This is just what I see in front of me. So your Kansas City Chiefs are getting 2 points against the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
And their over under is 47 and a half. So I don't know what your odds are. I think that over looks tempting. I think that over looks tempting. You don't really ever see you don't see the round number line very often, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a world where it ends in a tie, where there's a push. Usually you would see like 2.5, 3.5, 5.5, something like that. So how do you feel about your Chiefs getting 2 points?
I do. I feel like they're clicking on all eight cylinders, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're in sync. They're really focused, Andy Reid has created a really great, culture around them, and they all seem to be moving in the same direction, so to speak. But I will tell you, I don't know a ton about the 49ers. However, I do know that I believe they were in it or won in 91, or something. And I think that they are aggressive, they are hungry, and they are also a very well-oiled machine.
Yeah, they've been pretty good for a few years. They actually made the Super Bowl a couple years ago and lost.
Yeah.
But they do have Christian McCaffrey, a proud Coloradan on their team there,
Colorado.
their coach is the son of another great Bronco, Mike Shanahan. Their coach, Kyle Shanahan, is there. And I think most importantly, and maybe most overlooked, they have the most Ducks on their team. They have 3 Oregon Ducks on their team.
Oh,
So by virtue of that, I am going to pick against you. I'm going to lean towards the
okay.
Niners get it done.
Okay.
I do feel like the Chiefs are kind of the team of destiny, right? They have, they came off kind of a good season, obviously in the Super Bowl, but maybe a middling season by their standards. But there's the whole obviously a lot of attention on them with Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift,
Oh yeah.
focus. She won Album of the Year last night. Now it's in Travis's court to kind of win the Super Bowl here to kind of try to equalize, maybe.
Yeah.
And of course, there are rumors about Andy Reid retiring. I think that they have a lot of like destiny on their side.
Yeah.
So now the boring stuff's out of the way. Let's get to the fun props here. Okay, so now I feel like usually you see kind of a variance here, but It's minus 105 for heads or tails on the coin toss. I know what your thoughts are there. So I'm going to record these just so we can go over them next week. So I'm going to record our picks here. So Michael took the points in the Chiefs,
Okay.
and I took the Niners.
Okay.
And what do you got for coin toss?
I think San Francisco's going to get it.
Okay, so that's a different. You can bet on that too. This is actually betting if it's going to be heads or tails.
Oh, it'll be heads.
It heads. Okay, cool. This is going to sound like I'm just picking against you, but I am a tails never fails guy, so I'm going to go with tails here.
Okay.
All right. So now this one is kind of interesting. I looked this up, so I'm gonna empower you some information here. So you can bet on the length of the national anthem performance. Okay.
Oh.
It's gonna be performed by one of America's sweetheart here, Reba McEntire. And it's over and under 90.5 seconds.
Under.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that. Now, do you want the information for you before you make your choice?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, I'm gonna take the over. Guess what the average time for a Super Bowl national anthem performance has been since they started recording it?
What?
2 minutes.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Yeah.
I think she's gonna do it quicker.
But 50% quicker, you think? Or I guess 25% quicker? Our girl Reba, she's not one to mess around, but we'll see, man. I think that's should be in every parlay. I think pound the over for the national anthem in every parlay here.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pick two more here.
Okay.
Okay. So what color do you think the Gatorade that will be poured on the winning coach is? Okay. So in ascending order, the odds are red or pink. So it gets longer odds as you go. Red or pink, purple in its own category, yellow, lime, or green, blue, orange, or for plus 1,000, you can get water or clear Gatorade.
Gosh, you go first.
Man, I think with leaning on, I feel like if I'm betting San Francisco and they have the most ducks in their team, I think going yellow, lime, green is in there. But I'm going to take for plus 500. I'll take classic Gatorade orange, man. So
I was gonna say the green actually.
Okay, I'll give you get three colors. You get yellow, lime, and green. So you get three flavors. I get one. Okay, and then lastly, for pretty long odds, yes being plus 1,100, no being minus 1,000. Will Travis Kelce propose to Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl?
No.
Okay, no.
Like on Super Bowl Sunday?
Yeah, after I don't think he gets like till the end of time. I think he gets like that day, basically. I think so. That's a good point. If you get forever, yes, it's a good bet. I think he gets like that day. Like I think that the spirit of it, I believe, is like on the field, camera on him. The CBS.
I don't think so.
Okay, no is my guess too. I thought you might take yes because you took the Chiefs to win, right? So does he build on this momentum, and go from there? So we got no here. Okay, we're both saying no. Both saying no. All right. So I don't want to do the math right now, but I will. I'll text it to you so you can include it in like the message here. And if we were to make all these bets in big parlay and put like $5 on it, we could see how we do here. I bet we're coming out like plus a couple thousand. So to go over, you have the Chiefs and the points. You're betting on heads, taking the under. Which who picks the under, man? That's so anti-fun. You're taking yellow, lime, or green Gatorade, and you're saying Travis Kelce will not propose to Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl.
At Super Bowl.
I am taking the Niners -2. I'm taking tails. I'm betting the over because I have a soul. I'm taking orange Gatorade, and I will also agree that Travis Kelce will not propose to Taylor Swift. So, guys, I guess keep in tune for us next week when half of us are rolling in, tens of dollars, and the other half are, eating soup because they lost $5 on a bet here to CBS. But we will, if you guys have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to us. We are going, and again, we'll be excited to talk to you guys next week about how the contracts class went and how the Super Bowl went and all that good stuff. But go ahead, and if you guys have any thoughts on these bets or any way you would go on this, go ahead and comment in the body here. We'd love to hear from you. How many of you agree with Michael and how many of you are correct? and we will go from there, guys. So have
All
a
right.
great day. Looking forward to
Yep.
connecting next week.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Good information. Thanks, Andrew.
You guys.